Hello and welcome to Miss Manley History Teacher's latest video on how to successfully answer the AQA Write an Account GCSE style question, which is worth 8 marks. Now this type of question is slightly unusual in the sense that it's a question that will appear in the conflict and tension paper, and it's also a question that will appear in the Elizabethan England 1568 until 1603 paper as well. So it's a question that if you study both of those topics will be really useful for you to understand the technique of how to write that type of answer to that question. So let's get started. So why is it that some students find this question quite awkward? Well, first of all, even though this question is in both the conflict and tension paper and also the Elizabethan England paper, sometimes the wording of the question is different depending on which paper you're answering this question in. For example, in the conflict and tension paper, usually you'll be given a specific period of time to write about. For example, here we've got a conflict and tension question on writing an account about how events in Manchuria became an international crisis in the years 1931 until 1933. So you're given a specific time frame to write within. However, in the Elizabethan England paper, you might be asked a question that is similar to this. Write an account of the ways in which Elizabeth dealt with the challenge of Puritanism. Now, you're not given a specific period of time to write within. You can pretty much write within that whole Elizabethan reign that you're aware of. Okay, so for the paper on Elizabethan England in AQA, it would be between 1568 and 1603. So you can pretty much write about Elizabeth dealing with the challenge of Puritanism within that complete reign of Elizabeth. Okay, but it's not made specific within the question itself. That's not made abundantly clear. But you can write within the whole Elizabethan rule in order to answer that question. So how can we best go about answering these types of questions? So here is an example of a model 8-mark write an account answer for the conflict and tension question, writing an account on how events in Manchuria became an international crisis in the years 1931 to 1933. And whenever you're answering a write an account question for the conflicts and tension paper, here are a few top tips to bear in mind when you're answering this type of question. You need to write in chronological order. You don't want to be starting off your answer by writing about what happened in Manchuria in 1933. Worse still, you don't want to be writing about the Manchurian crisis outside the time period in question. So you don't want to be writing about Manchurian crisis in 1934 or 1935. You need to stick to the time period in question. You also need to show lots of good knowledge of the period in question. And in this model answer, they show lots of good own specific knowledge by making statements like as a permanent member of the League of Nations. Okay, they also show it by using names of certain key individuals like Lord Lytton. And they're aware of the fact that Japan walked out of the League in fury in response to the League of Nations condemning its invasion of Manchuria. So here they've shown lots of good knowledge. You're also encouraged to try and link different parts of the account together with connecting words or phrases like therefore, consequently, as a result. So here they've used phrases like however, after, I'll use a different colour this time, however, after the Manchurian crisis. They've also said this meant that, or as a result of, you can use as well. So they've used a few good connective phrases here as well. Now this isn't, and this is important to note, this isn't a complete answer here. Okay, it's a snapshot of what a model answer should look like. So just bear in mind that this example we're using in the video, it's not a fully written account of how events in Manchuria became an international crisis. But the type of language and the skills that are being used and the knowledge that's being shown, they're all really useful that you should look to take into your answer when you're writing an account in the conflict and tension paper. Next, we've got the Elizabethan write an account question, also worth 8 marks. It's also worth bearing in mind as well that for both of these types of questions, you want to be looking to spend about 10 minutes writing your answer to these types of questions. Now, for this type of question, even though it's worded very similarly to the conflict of attention question, you still also want to be writing chronologically as well. So you want to be writing in time order. Even though you're not given a specific time frame, it's still useful to try and write about events in time order. You also still should be looking to use lots of your own knowledge as well for this type of question in the Elizabethan paper. However, a slight difference here is that for this type of write an account question, you need to actually focus more on explaining how Elizabeth, in this case, dealt with the challenge of Puritanism, rather than merely just linking different parts of the narrative together. So straight away in the first sentence, we've got an example of how Elizabeth dealt with the challenge of Puritanism. She dealt with the challenge by arresting the Archbishop of Canterbury, Edmund Grindal, and replacing him with John Whitgift. So straight away there, we've got an example of an explanation and some really good own knowledge as well, combining the two together. We've also got examples of how Elizabeth dealt with the challenge of Puritanism by information in the second paragraph, where Elizabeth passed laws in 1593 which allowed her and her government to execute anyone suspected of being a recusant or a separatist. And then in this answer, we've got more specific own contextual knowledge. The example of Barrow and Greenwood being hung in 1593. So here again, it's more of a snapshot of what a model answer should look like, but you need to really take into consideration those top tips that I've spoken about by writing chronologically as best as you can, using lots of your own knowledge, and for this type of write an account question in the Elizabethan paper, to write with more of a focus on explaining how certain events panned out as they did. If you like this video, click on the like button and give my channel a subscribe. Mr. Manley, History Teacher. Thanks very much.